I'm Karen Pierce. I work with my husband, Marc Jenesel, who is a ceramist. We've been working together for about 20 years, and we have been combining raku pottery, which I'll explain later, and basket weaving into sculptural pieces. So for the purpose of this Day Guild meeting, I'm going to be talking about the very beginnings of when I started with basketry. And then tomorrow, we'll be getting into more technical things of what we're actually doing today, and finding ways to solve problems, because problems always come up. I worked for about 20 years, over 20 years in Vienna, Austria, which is where I started basket making, and then moved back to the States and eventually met my husband, and we started collaborating on pieces. I'll be talking about styles, starting off with the traditional, functional, utilitarian pieces that I was learning about, and then moving into the more sculptural, decorative pieces that Marc and I have been collaborating on. And just for the purpose, for our understanding here in our Willow Bend studios, we kind of put them into three different shapes, basically, being a tower pieces that are very tall with willow or with salt cedar. The fan pieces, which are also very tall, but they fan out, and what we affectionately call Wilsons, the very small pieces. And here's an example of these three types. Starting out in Vienna, working with the plating of flat material. So it involved using eventually handles and feet. I learned a lot about lashing rims on, and they were basically over-under patterns of flat material. And it allowed me to do some experimenting with twill patterns, also discovering that starting with a square base, I could actually make a round basket at the top. And I did some hexagonal weave, but not very much. And then moved into twining of round materials. So I hope that I can explain this well enough, but basically I'm working with 2 weavers at any one time, and sometimes 3 or 4, depending on what kind of a pattern I want. And the patterns were spirals or color blocks. I also did a few pieces that were double-walled pieces coming up and joining at the top. I did some coiling, some rib work, not very much, but I really enjoy getting a lot of color into my pieces, painting with acrylics and also dyeing with commercial dyes. Other technical terms, wrapping, stitching, and metal work has become really important for our work, our collaborative work, in that Marc started lining his pottery with copper leaf, and we brought a lot of the metal components up into the weaving as well. So we treated them with heat to get some color, or put a patina on them. I embossed pieces of metal foil, copper foil, with actual leaves, corrugated some of the heat-treated copper foil, and then folding and plying of wire. Materials involved from the very beginning were reed. Most people call it reed. I started calling it rattan, from Southeast Asia and China, and I either dyed the material or left it natural. The willow we collected along the streams, and I actually tried to get a willow bed going. It was not very successful. Ultimately, I purchased willow from Iowa and from Ontario. Tamarisk, or salt cedar, you may know as an invasive weed in Colorado. which when I go to collect it, I'm basically supporting the plant because I'm cutting it back and making the roots nice and strong. But I stopped doing that. But anyway, it's a beautiful, beautiful plant. So the willow and the tamarisk are used as spokes in these pieces. Also, philodendron sheath I mentioned. I got that from crawling underneath bushes in Florida because that's basically the part of the plant, the philodendron plant, that falls off and gets collected by the landscapers. Date palm inflorescence has become really, really important in my work. I initially included it in the weaving, and more recently with the collaborative work, it is added to the weaving at the very end and stands on its own. It comes from Florida. There is a type in Florida that has a very thick base and a very, very thin tip. But more often I've been using inflorescence from Arizona. And again, the landscapers cut this stuff off of the tree, and I'll show you what it looks like. It grows on a stalk. They cut it off of the tree and get rid of it, whereas I'm the one who will pull over to the side of the road and fill the back of my car with it. Or in the case when my dad was still alive, we did a raid on the local golf course early in the morning when nobody was awake, and helped them trim their trees a little bit. So that was really fun. And more recently, I've gotten some really consistent pieces from an organic date farm in southern Colorado. The work that Marc and I have been doing together has involved the use of semi-precious stone beads and discs, also glass beads, in his case, especially sheets of mica that he attaches to his pottery. I mentioned before dyes and paints. I had some trouble with the light fastness of the natural dyes, especially indigo. And I may give it another try, but it didn't seem to get as rich or as light fast as some of the commercial dyes. And then we've worked with copper, as I mentioned, in many different forms. Here we go with the very first piece that I made in Austria, in Vienna. I was working. I took an evening class to learn how to make a basket because I needed something to cover a really ugly clay pot. And the woman was doing all different kinds of crafts that evening. She was doing glass etching and I think dyeing of fabric, all different kinds of things. So those of us who wanted to learn how to make a basket didn't get much attention. She showed us at least what we needed to buy and use, but we'd do a couple rows and then have to stop and ask for advice. And then we'd turn around and go in the opposite direction. And that got to be a little boring for me and tedious. So I went out and bought a couple of books and started teaching myself. So the first simple pieces you can see in this photo are very flat, very simple woven pieces with reed. And I wanted to sell these to people at the office. And one of them suggested, since we're in an international group, that it might be a good idea if I made something that was easier to ship. So I started making complete baskets. These are very small, they're only about 3 or 4 inches tall, and putting sides on them and rims, so they were easy to slip into a bubble pack and send off to wherever. I think some of them ended up in Asia and Southern Africa. I got into more functional pieces. Again, these are mostly from patterns, but I tried some stuff on my own. Patterns from the United States mostly. So you see we've got a magazine rack. I needed a spice rack for my nice little German language spice jars and trays. And the tray has ended up actually in my husband's shop, and he uses it to carry stuff around, but it's being used. So yay. A lot of woven rims on these, so that you can see in this case here, and in the spice rack, that the spokes actually come up out of the weaving, and that's what's used to create the rim. More functional pieces. Somebody needed an umbrella stand. And so I guess I have to ask, does anybody remember rain? Because we could sure use it. And then it was a thing there, and you ran around with your umbrella all the time. Hexagonal weave again. I did very few of those, but the basket in the lower right-hand corner was modeled after one that I borrowed from a friend. She had a miniature version of a great gathering basket from southern France. So I thought I would try that. Again, functional baskets, there you go for all of you knitters. Hopefully it will keep the ball of yarn in the basket. And then the one at the very bottom of the screen, I actually made to collect paper so that I could recycle my newspapers. I did a couple of lamps for the apartment and mirrors. The one on the right features a Madeira border on it. So it basically weaves back onto itself. Started using more handles and feet, trying to figure out how to elevate or to protect the bottom of the basket, especially if it has something heavy in it. We wanted to be able to strengthen the base of the basket. And I collected a bunch of fabric from the United States to line baskets. I took it with me to Austria, and I brought it back with me to Aurora, and then I moved it to Louisville, and then I brought it down to Colorado Springs, and then I gave it away because I never used it again. But there's another example of something that I have learned from all of you fiber people, other fiber people, and that's the word stash, which meant something different when I was in college, but it's a very legitimate thing now. And another example of trays that have just slightly different treatments of the rim. Also from a pattern, round twining and plated. Again, I developed a stash of ribbon, and you can see in these pieces there's an inlay in the handles just to make it a little bit more interesting. And then very small pieces that I started making ornaments for trees. And I'm quite sure these came from patterns, and I want to guess Cherokee type pattern. And then one day, a colleague from work whose wife was a jewelry artist gave me a photo of Craft magazine, and in that was an ad for for the Basket Makers Association in England that was holding a workshop, a week-long workshop at a manor in Amersham, UK, called Woodrow, and it was basically a boys' club manor that they rented out to various groups. And this was the first time that I discovered there were other people making baskets, because I was completely on my own, even though there was a nice big store that sold a lot of reed. I couldn't really find anybody. There was no internet. I didn't know who was making baskets at the time. I tried to apprentice with an elderly basket maker in a province south of Vienna, but that he fell ill. That wasn't possible. So I signed up for this week-long class in working with willow in Amersham. And later I took another workshop following year in hexagonal weave with strapping tape. But there was the willow that was so impressive. You'd walk into the room and there was this glorious aroma of willow. I will never forget that. Walking around in Monument Valley Park here in Colorado Springs, all of a sudden I will get a whiff of something and I realize it's the willow, and it takes me right back to that spot. On the left is Sandra Barker, who was teaching traditional basketry The board that she has on her lap is one that was commonly used way back. She's sitting on a cushion, and she's showing how she has been weaving up the sides and is tapping down each row as she goes. And that would be me on the right doing my own attempt at the same thing. I have started to bend down the willow rods into a rim. So the result of that workshop was a fruit bowl. And this one down here is the one I was working on in the previous slide. And another technique for weaving on this. These are all different types of weaving. And I made myself a little carrying basket, which I use frequently now to go between the house and the studio. And then I discovered that there was a town called Lichtenfels in Germany, in Bavaria, that has an annual basket festival, and the streets are full of German sausage and beer and baskets of absolutely every type you can imagine. I felt like I was in heaven. So I spent a couple of days there. One on the left, the man on the left, is making coiled baskets. I may be wrong, but I believe that some of these baskets are used to put dough in when it's rising, and then it's for making bread. So you can see actually the texture of the bread is that comes from the coiled weaving. The man on the right is making pieces that will be incorporated in baskets, and he has a device that hangs on to the piece of willow or whatever material he's trying to shave down. It holds it in place for him while he uses his draw knife, and you'll see a smaller version of that later. And I discovered there was a giant basket in the same town at the museum, biggest basket I've ever seen. This was shortly before I made the decision to come back to the United States to repatriate. And it's a danger, and it's probably the same way with you. When you're making things, you also tend to collect them. So I had this big collection of baskets that I had to get back to the States, and the movers thought I was a little crazy, but I was not leaving without them. So that's my apartment in Vienna. I moved back to the States went to Aurora to finish a master's degree, and not in art, by the way, and continue to make baskets. I started selling baskets at outdoor markets and at guild shows like the Hand Weavers Guild of Boulder, Rocky Mountain Weavers, and then later in Pikes Peak Weavers Guild. These are very simple wall pieces. You can see in this piece the God's Eye pattern. Covered up, unfortunately, is a similar kind of weave to attach the two hoops together. And then started incorporating other materials. And these bands here on the left and on the right are the Florida date palm inflorescence. You can see some roving. I'm sure I got that from a hand weaver's sale that I started to incorporate. And this would be the philodendron sheath in through the middle with seagrass. Starting to use seagrass. So you can see some patterns here that I've been experimenting with. And the patterns are made basically by the number of weavers that I have, the number of spokes, and whether or not I can get a spiral out of it or more of a block pattern. This piece at the top was not woven like the other three pieces. It has the spokes that stick out, and it was just a different kind of method for closing the basket, called T-twining. Again, some more functional baskets. This was still in Aurora. On the left, CD baskets. At the upper right, wine bottle baskets, and my favorite or nemesis, I'm not sure which, is a stair step basket. I swore I would never make another one after that, but I had to hang on to a handle to make one for Mark because he never got a stair step basket in all of those years, and he wants one. So, and of course, the neighbor's cat had to come and sit and watch me work. This piece does not yet have a handle, a rim on it, and as soon as he moves, I will, be adding the rim to that piece. Really sweet cat. Some more functional baskets. The one up in the upper photo has been space dyed. The taller basket in the back has been stained with walnut stain. And this one here has the shiny cane, and it's been over dyed. Some more examples of square bases and round rims. We don't quite have the cat head shape yet. Here I am in Lakewood, I'm guessing for Rocky Mountain Weavers, doing a demonstration. The stair step basket on the left, and then on the right, I'm using one of these devices that holds the rim in place while I move the draw knife across it to taper the ends, so I can put the ends together, the two ends of the rim together, and they will look like one. So there will be a smooth rim. Here is the piece that I was telling you about. It holds, this is a rod in the middle here. This is not what I would be actually working on. It was just for an example, but that's what I would be using to taper the ends of the rims. And that was made by John McGuire. It was really, really, still have it. It's a really, really nice piece of equipment. We're starting to see a little bit more of the cat head shape squared around in this. All of these have rims that have been lashed on. And this twill pattern here is created when I have an even number. I'm working around the basket in an even number of spokes, and when I want to move up and alternate, I have to skip a spoke. So I go over 2 spokes instead of 1. The photo in the upper left is something that I learned from Judith Olney at probably the Michigan Basket Weavers Guild. She called it a squashy basket, and it's basically a cat head basket that's been squashed down. Again, you see, since I had an even number of spokes and needed to alternate, I have a little bit of a twill. I've skipped over 2 spokes to go up the side of the basket. And then the other photos are of pieces that I alternated. I just decided I needed to try some different styles on my own and see what would happen. Again, we're getting, you can see at the base of this, we're getting a little bit more cat head shaped. Of course, if you turn the basket over, that's where the cat head comes from, in case I didn't make that very clear. And taking the twill a little farther, but again, these are square bases ending up with round rims. Some more twill. And then I went through a period where I had to, I wanted to experiment with black, getting a really, really true dark, deep black. For those of you who dye your own yarns, I don't know if you've discovered it's a little difficult to balance the components that go into making black to get a true black. My father suggested that I try lamp black, and I was pretty sure that wouldn't work because everything would be messy from it. So I just continued mixing commercial dyes until I got something that felt really good. These are very large baskets. Then in Colorado, Colorado Springs, after I'd moved down here and was a member of the Colorado Basket Makers Guild, we had a workshop, I think it was organized by Linda Luganbill. We brought in Cass Schorsch from Michigan, and this is one of the baskets from that workshop. She taught us, I don't remember exactly what she called them, but they were more tapestry types, and she incorporated bark from various places. I think pine bark, yeah, I can't remember exactly, pine bark, bass, the inside bass tree fiber. And I just remember it must have been in the summer because I had the baskets in my car when we were taking a break for lunch, and I came out to the car and the whole car was filled with this beautiful, beautiful scent of pine. It was really wonderful. So the photos on the right are of pieces that I did after that, just experimenting with different materials. I added seagrass, philodendron sheath, date palm inflorescence, and I believe there's some corn husk in there somewhere, probably up at the top. I think that's corn husk at the top. Take a look in particular at the base in this photo on the right-hand side. This was how Cass got us to open up and the base and get some actual movement in the piece, some undulating movement in the piece. I came home and did some more of those. These are considerably taller. The one on the left is 33 inches high. She is called La Abuela. She lives with a friend of ours now. That's dyed rattan, seagrass, elm bark, which is plentiful around here, philodendron sheath, corn husk, date palm inflorescence. The one on the right is called Tapestry. It's 23 inches tall. Dyed rattan, seagrass, again, elm bark, philodendron sheath, and date palm inflorescence. So you see at the base, again, this open base that starts to push things up a little bit and allows me to make more of a tapestry type basket. I took that idea and made something completely different. This one is called Sunrise. It's 24 inches high, 20 inches wide, and 10 inches in diameter. Again, the same opening up at the base. I just took it in a different direction. This also allowed me to make an oval piece out of a round base. So I think potters will understand this. Also, one summer, I decided to try to make some kind of a tapestry that would actually work for a wall. And this is in the home of the person who bought it. I took as many local materials as I could find and incorporated them in it. But I think what I remember the most from making this piece was being outdoors, because I didn't have enough room to do it indoors. It was very tall. And listening to all the birds. And I remembered this, I went right back to this during the lockdown early in the pandemic, when I tried to spend as much time outdoors as I can and listening to all of the birds, because it was quiet enough that I could finally hear them again. No traffic. I was invited to do a show at the Dairy Center for the Arts by Harv Mastelier, who is a master woodworker. You will see work by other people as well, or ceramics, and but especially his furniture is wonderful. The piece in the front here is, I think it's probably what he is known for best, is the woven top. And I love the shadow. I love the pattern that it creates underneath it. I wanted to share with you a couple photos of his work too. He has the cradle on the left side and what he calls his stereo cabinet on the right. He now lives somewhere between Black Hawk and Netherlands. He's not very easy to find, but I have his contact information if you are interested in getting in touch with him. And here's a detail of a tall, excuse me, hall table and the woven top. He really encouraged me to go big and to do something different. And I have to say that this was my very first show, big show like this, exposition. And I owe a lot to Harv Masterleer. I thank him for his encouragement. And we were in touch recently, which is how I got these photos. And really fabulous woodworker and a great guy. So then I went off in a completely different direction. And started painting baskets because I wanted more color. I wanted permanent color. This piece is called Connections. It's made of, you can see 4 of the pieces. This is a basket turned upside down. This is a basket rolled over on itself, another basket, and then the flames at the top. And inside here is one little piece that helps raise the flames just a little bit. This piece is 52 inches high and 28 inches in diameter. It lives at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. It ended up on the cover of the Basket Makers Association newsletter or pamphlet that they send out monthly way back when. On the left is a really, really bad photo of the completed piece. After I had woven everything, somebody asked me what not to submit to a show, and that's a really good example of a photo to not submit. And that piece, Marc helped me set up a spray booth, and that is how I used a spray gun for the first time and the acrylic paints and sprayed the whole piece. On the right is a little detail of the hands, the fans that come out at the very top, or the leaves. 3 more pieces. The one on the left is called Not a Pot. It's 23 inches high and 20 inches in diameter. The one on the right-hand side, upper right, is called Windows, and that's where I started opening up the weaving to let a little more light in this case, to let you look inside and see the separate piece of weaving, the cone that's inside the basket. It's 15 inches high, 13 in diameter. And at the base, at the bottom, is a bowl that is 10 inches high and 26 inches in diameter. And that was my life with painted bowls. I was done with that for a while. I came back to it much later, and I'll show you that later. This is my husband, Marc, who is working with a pot that he has thrown and altered. He's already trimmed the base, he's trimmed the top, and now he is marking it to add holes and to change the shape. He is going to be firing that in a bisque kiln to make it hard, and then he will glaze and fire it in the raku kiln using the raku method. So what is raku altogether? I understand for him that it's the name of a Japanese family. I'm going to read something that he wrote it's a part of an article that we have in a magazine that was published in 2019. And there are many steps and processes involved in creating a piece. After throwing a piece on his potter's wheel, Marc alters the shape and adds holes to attach spokes. The pottery is bisque fired, and then a thick copper sand glaze is applied. Raku firing the pot involves heating the pot from cold to 1850 degrees Fahrenheit, and then taking it out of the kiln and placing it in a can of combustible material. Once the fire gets started, the can is covered to cut off the airflow. The fired piece tends toward the coppers and blues, but often results in all the colors of the rainbow with deep crackles of complementary colors. Each piece is unique. Marc may fire the piece a few times until he achieves the look he wants. He then lines it with several layers of copper leaf and may embellish it with copper and semi-precious gems before passing it on to me. And then my job is to attach spokes and weave the piece, and I take over from there. Also, my job is to find materials, colors, textures that complement the pot and let as much light in as possible. So next we have a photo of a pot that has just come out of the kiln. You can see all of the beautiful textures and colors that I get to work with. The inside will be covered in copper leaf with several layers and sealed. Now, early on, he would make an even number of holes in the pottery so that I could attach my spokes, which were out of reed or rattan, and weave up from there. I hope you can see, you might see a better example later, but I used one spoke. I went through the hole, one hole to the inner part of the pot, and then turned around and it came right back out again. And I wove up from there so that I had two spokes out of one piece of reed. We entered local exhibitions, the last one being in Manitou Springs, when with the larger pots, we lost a piece to the wind. It fell and broke the pot, and there's no way to fix it. So then we started taking part in local open studio events and brought people into our studio here on the west side of Colorado Springs. A different kind of glaze for Marc. This was a white crackle with some color at the top. And I'm still making patterns, still attaching the same way. The one on the left is called Sprung. They are all rattan and raku. The one on the left is 12 inches high and 12 inches in diameter at its widest. Then we started adding inflorescence to the pieces in our collaborations. The one on the right side, I think you can see very clearly that I'm alternating the spokes. It's 12 inches high and 15 inches in diameter, and it's called Why So Blue? This is my collection called Toots. And Toots' cousin, 15 inches high and 8 inches in diameter. And here you see again the tapestry type of weaving coming back into play, this time with a ceramic base, with a raku base, and all of the same materials again. Day into Night is 5 inches high and 10 inches in diameter. I've included date palm inflorescence. I started making larger pieces. The one on the left is called Slow Tide, 19 inches high, 17 in diameter. The one on the right is called Green Horizon. And at the top, you'll see some pieces sticking out. There's a technique that I don't know if it was started by Kari Lonning or if she just made it her own through her baskets, but most of her baskets will include this type of texture. So I'm just experimenting with it on my own. This is where we're starting to add wire to the whole thing, just to bring in a little bit of sparkle. The piece on the left, the large brush top, is called Trophy. It is 19 inches high, 15 inches wide, and 12 inches deep. So it's an oval shape that was really basically incorporated from the shape that Marc gave me. On the right is more copper wire. We started raiding the local OEM electronic supply store for wire. So again, these are all with an even number of holes for my weavers. And then one day, Marc made an uneven number. messed everything up for me. And we started a whole new style of work. And this is using beads strung on waxed linen. That piece goes through the pot. The bead stays on one side, and on the other side is the spoke that gets tied on. So this is the very first piece called Do Bead Do. Using beads, and again, I had to start another stash. So now we started collecting beads. We started, I think, going to the Rocky Mountain Bead Society show. There's one coming up in April in case you're interested in looking and going. And then we just started going to, to any gem and mineral show that came up and started collecting, because you can never have enough beads. You can never have enough colors to go with your project. Here's another example of that. You can see a little bit better on this piece how the spokes are tied on the outside and the beads are on the inside. But it's another kind of a decorative thing. It's functional and it's decorative. I've been telling you about date palm inflorescence. Now here is a stalk that grows in the date palm tree. The pieces that you see, this is actually from Southern California, from this organic date farm. What they do, I discovered by watching, what was his name? Anyway, Dirty Jobs, Mike something or other. They crawl up into the tree, they cut out the very center of the stalk and get rid of it, so that the plant has a little bit more room. They dust the female plants with pollen that they have already corrected from male plants, and then they cover them up with bags, tie them up, and then that's where the dates grow. So on the right-hand side, I've got just a garden, planter, and I'm soaking the inflorescence, which I'll take out, cover up, and with a towel, and then bend and shape in whatever shape I ultimately want for a specific piece. This is inflorescence. This is actually Arizona inflorescence. It's a little thinner. Started using a lot more wire, copper and brass wire. The piece itself has been space dyed at Space Dyed Reed. It looks like I was little hard to tell, but it looks like I was weaving with 3 weavers or 3-rod whale. Again, this is brass wire. Initially, we used very tiny beads and very tiny holes, and then as the pieces got bigger and I wanted them to be proportional, I used 6mm beads, which is mostly what I use now. And at the top of this piece, you'll see that I don't have the traditional rim that's woven from the spokes, using the spokes. I've left the spokes sticking out, and I am wrapping them in wire and coming back down and grabbing the last 3 rows to keep the top in place. Some more. This is called Sticks, Loops, and Coils. It's 16 inches high, space dyed, and 8 inches in diameter. I did a lot of metal work on the outside of this, a lot of wire work. Adding more wire, and actually this photo is backwards. I'm a right-handed weaver most of the time when I twine, and this photo got in backwards. So all of the stitches go from the lower right to the upper left when they should be the other way around. And then adding wire again. I was probably a Mary Hetmansberger workshop where we were taking wire, making shapes, and then hammering them out. So I played a little bit of that. And then at the top, you see the brush top. And I've included sticks of wire as well to just bring a little light up to the top. Wow, I'm starting to run out of time. Again, wrapping the wire or wrapping the piece. This is something that Marc did with knotting. I've incorporated colored wire in with the seagrass, and Marc has started to open up the pieces, putting in hammered copper. A really nice piece of metalwork by Marc. This is Kilauea, adding more and more worked metal. Then he started giving me two-piece ceramic pieces, so I had to figure out how to attach those. These are copper rods. The one on the left is called Rods and Reed, and it is 10 inches high by 4 inches in diameter. This one's called Crown, 23 inches high and 24 inches in diameter, so much bigger. A similar piece called Copper Vined, where the copper wire is crawling up the side of the pot and the weaving and extends all the way into the inflorescence. I mentioned that I started growing willow here. It was not very successful. This was the willow patch at its absolute best, but the first year the deer got into it and nibbled it down. So we put a big fence around it, and then the bugs got in. So this is the willow bed, willow coppice, in the middle of the winter when the leaves are down and it's ready to be harvested. And our little dog Babu at the side there. So this is basically why I had to start buying from other people. And other than that, we're not on a river. I had to water it. It just didn't seem right in the middle of a drought. So I gave up on it. But this is how these were used. They were attached to the pot. The one on the left is willow. The one on the right is salt cedar. And I'm opening up the pot to let more light in so you can see the inside. So these are more of these windows. We managed to get two pieces accepted for 500 baskets, which I don't know, I think that was 2004, something like that. And these are the two pieces. Cross currents, 36 inches high, 20 inches in diameter. Sea, Sand, and Sun, which is actually a double-walled basket. I have one basket attached to the inside of the pot, one to the outside, and in this area here, I have paper that runs from one basket to the other, back and forth. It's handmade paper. It is 17 inches high and 24 inches in diameter. A little bit of the detail. It's kind of hard to see. I believe that this was Marc's first go at lining the pots with metal leaf. So this was kind of a combination of colors. And probably one of his very first pots. And I need you to see this because I don't very often have the pot finished, ready to work on. In fact, all of the pots that I have that I could have shown you are already occupied. So this is this beautiful glow that the pot gives out, and you in any kind of light in your room, it will pick up the light and reflect it back out. So first he had closed pots and lined them, and then he opened them up. More copper work by Marc, using metal leaf on the outside, using slots and attaching some of his metal work. Embellishments like pieces of copper and stone beads and discs. This was the beginning of the end of using reed for me. I started using seagrass. I had found out through a class by Judy Dominic, who lives in Covington, Kentucky, that seagrass is very pliable. It's really lovely to work with. It's very soft, and I can turn corners a whole lot easier. So I'm not weaving around and around and around. I'm weaving to the end of one panel and then turning around and weaving back. it changed everything for my style, and it allowed me to get a little bit more sculptural. So in this piece, you see the inflorescence at the top. Once we did a few of these, we decided it was time to start entering national shows. So we entered the Philadelphia Museum of Art craft show and the American Craft Council on the East and West coasts. We were in Washington, D.C., West Palm Beach a few years, Charlotte, North Carolina, and a show in Boston. This is a show at the American Craft Exposition in Evanston, Illinois. It also changed the way we showed things because we had to start lugging all of our stuff across country in a trailer. So that everything you see there, we brought with us. Another show with Marc. This piece I affectionately call Bangs. I took little noodles, foam noodles, and wrapped the seagrass around them, and then held them in place with a plastic bottle that had been slit down one side. This is the next iteration of that same thing. We started calling them Wilsons because of a customer who came into our booth, probably in West Palm Beach, and said it reminded him of Wilson from the Tom Hanks movie, which I think was called Castaway. So you can see a lot more beads, different shapes, rough shapes. That was something I had to start doing because the coast was too humid for the bangs, and they didn't stay in shape. So I had to find another solution. Adding all different colors of materials and textures. This is the beginning, the preparation for a piece that you will see soon called Blue Waltz. The smoked rattan here that I'm going to be cutting into appropriate lengths for spokes. I trim the ends of it, which is something I learned that if I don't whittle down the ends, it scratches the inside of the pot. It scratches the leaf off, so I had to figure out how to deal with that. On the left is copper mesh that I have heat treated with a propane torch. Some of the copper wire that I use to make jump rings that go between the bead and the pot. And my absolute favorite tools right here. I've had this one in the middle since the beginning of basket weaving. And if I lose it, I'll be in big trouble. And here's a pot already for me to start attaching spokes. This piece is one in a series of fans that I told you about before. This is called Wild Surf. It's 39 inches high and 39 inches in diameter approximately. You will see here some copper mesh that I have attached using silver-plated colored copper wire. It has two sides that are connected at the middle, and the very top is woven all in one long consecutive piece. This one's called Three Fans for a good reason. It has three sides. Beads at the top with a lapis lazuli disc and turquoise beads. This one's called Copper Mine, 36 inches high. These are copper nuggets that Marc has made from melting down scraps of other pieces that I've been working on. Garnet arches. You can see varying the type of weed. This is just a twining, reverse twining, and then this is twining and then reversing, but changing the direction of the stitch. Let's meet in the middle. This, again, 3 pieces, and they are attached in the middle, but not woven all as one. This is 32 inches high, about 35 inches in diameter. Healing, revealing. And this is a piece where I started off with 3, joined them here, and then split farther up the pot. This piece was purchased and by a woman who's working for the Pikes Peak Hospice. She was in a team when they were building the new facility here in Colorado Springs, and she wanted to donate this piece to commemorate their time together. It's called Coming Together, 36 inches high, 36 by 22 at the top. And it has 2 sides. Again, you can see, maybe, I hope, that each side was started separately, and then in the middle, they were joined. So this was constant weaving, and then adding spokes here to spread the spokes out and make it wider. This one's called Swing. It's 26.5 inches high. Carnelian beads. And this is actually seagrass, but it has not been corded. So that's kind of stitched in. This one is called Garnet Line because I have a line of garnet beads going up the middle and separating 2 sides of the weaving. And I mentioned towers, the series of towers that we were doing. This piece shows you the embellishment that Marc added at the beginning, and then the triangles of copper mesh that I had heat treated, cut out, hemmed, and attached with silver-plated colored copper wire over willow. This one's called Bead House, and I wish I had a closer photo of that, but there are beads dangling down from this window. And windows were another way that I tried to let light in addition to the copper mesh, so that you can get more of the effect of the copper leaf inside the pot. This one's called City at Night. It's 45 inches high. These are all bands of copper mesh, letting light into the interior, which I think was successful. Then we started traveling Southwest United States. This was from the area, actually southeastern Utah. And we were so taken away with a beautiful landscape that I came back and decided it was time to add something different to the tower pieces. And this is called Moab. It's 28 inches high. And it's mostly twining. So what you saw initially with the tapestry pieces was single weave, whereas this is double weave. So I started doing more and more. This one's called Shoreline, 40 inches high. Turquoise tapestry. And we were invited to do an article for Textile Fiber Forum, which is an Australian magazine. Comes out of, I believe, Adelaide. This one's called Tall Blonde, 37 inches high. Turquoise Tower, 44 inches high. Blue Dancer, this is the one I showed you the preparation for earlier, 30 inches high. Country Roads. Niagara, 38 inches high. And again, a little bit more geometric with sodalite and lapis lazuli. This one is called Titan. It's 52 inches high. And I'm adding more textured. There's some curvy wired mesh copper mesh, and some more textured beads, including unakite, titanium jasper, and blue waltz. This piece was commissioned last year by a local collector. They have now 3 of our pieces. This is 29 inches high, 25 inches wide, and 16 inches in deep. It is made out of 2 separate panels. And then with the pandemic, of course, shows were canceled. Some of them continued online, but we were not interested in shipping our things around. And besides, it's really difficult to kind of get a sense of the piece. It's much easier when people come into the booth and they see how big the piece is and try to figure out whether it will work in their place. And unfortunately, 2 of the galleries we were showing in were closed during that period. One woman just decided she didn't want to deal with it anymore. It was really our favorite gallery in Salida, Colorado, called Culture Clash. But she was just too worried about keeping her family safe with the pandemic, and it was just time to retire. We are still showing in Colorado Springs at the Hunter Wolf Gallery. And a little bit closer to you, we are in Spirits in the Wind Gallery in Golden. And if you go in there, Dawn will love to tell you all about our pieces if you want to see any of it in person. I want to thank you all for watching. I really appreciate your attention and your interest. And I hope that if you have any questions about anything you've seen, you will either ask me today, or maybe they'll come up tomorrow. Or you can always get in touch with us at clayandfiber.com. That's our website. Or you can write to me directly at info@clayandfiber.com. So again, thank you very much. And thanks for your patience with the beginning of the show. I'm sorry I had technical difficulties, but it's the way it goes. So I am open for any questions that you may have. We'll turn it back to Amy.
Thank you so much, Karen, for such a comprehensive and visually beautiful presentation. It has been just such a feast for the eyes to see your work over time.
Thank you.
Margaret, did you want to say anything?
I just want to say what a super wonderful treat this has been, Karen, for me and for a whole lot of us. And technical difficulties, we're all working through it. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody have some comments?
Karen, we have some questions from the chat. I'll read out to you. The first one is, can you say a little more about what inflorescence is?
Okay. I think I covered that a little bit farther down in the show, where I said it's actually a stalk that grows in the palm tree, and dangling from that stalk are these fingers, and growing on those little fingers are the dates that you will be eating from Costco or wherever. They're protected again in a bag while they're growing. But so I basically am getting the stuff again that the farmers don't want, because they're cutting that out of the very tip of that stalk. I hope that answers that question.
Yes, thank you. Another question from the chat. If you have time, and unless you're covering this tomorrow night, can you comment a bit on the business side of being a professional basket maker? Can you, and how do you make a living from this?
It's a really good question. Let's see. I did a whole presentation for Colorado Weavers Day. Also, unfortunately, had technical trouble, and my arm was in a sling because I'd broken my arm. On entering shows and getting into galleries, and you know, I'm very happy to share that with people, but you have to have really good photos if you're going to approach a gallery. And I've noticed, actually, I hate to be really discouraging here, but I noticed of the probably 20 galleries we've been in, that maybe 4 of them are still open. So that is, yeah, really sad. And they were already closing before the pandemic, but some of them just couldn't make it through. You make your money that way by giving them 50% of the price. That's what they take in commission. If you sell it directly, which you can do, in our case, online is really difficult because of the nature of what we've got. It's not an impulse purchase, but if you sell it directly, you get to keep what you make, but you don't want to undersell your galleries. So the prices need to be the same as you see them in the gallery. Otherwise, it's not a good business relationship. The other way to make money is to haul your stuff across the country in a trailer and set up at a show and sell directly to the owner. But first of all, you have to get into the show. And in the case of the Philadelphia Museum of Art Craft Show, there are, I don't know, a couple thousand entries. So you're competing with everybody else. You have to have really unique work. I would encourage anybody who's even considering doing that to look up some of these shows and see what they're showing. And we were in with some fabulous, fabulous artists, craftspeople, just like top of the line, really, really, really talented. The other way to make money in this, I've noticed, is to be really extroverted, give workshops, write books, and publish them. So you're selling your making, you are writing and publishing, and you are teaching. That's kind of like the trifecta of people who I think can actually make a living from this. Pandemic didn't help. Let's put it that way. Didn't help. I can't. I wish I could be more encouraging, but I see a hand raised. Was that Jane? No. Okay. That was Jane stretching.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was my question about the business side. I mean, I don't have any intention, but I'm curious. I mean, have you been able to make a living? Or do you have to go out and have a side job? You don't have to answer that if that's too invasive.
I will be really honest. No.
Mm. Yeah.
I wish I could say otherwise, but I also don't like working 12 hours a day. I'll be also very honest there. And probably if we had more stuff out there and did more shows, we are limited in that we don't do any outdoor shows. It's just our stuff is just too fragile for that. So I would say that the people who are doing outdoor shows and are doing, we did like 2 or 3, I think we've done 30 shows over the last 10 years. That's probably nothing compared to those who can take their work outdoors, because there are many, many, many outdoor shows. And I think those people would have better luck. The weaving side of things, you just need to watch out for rain. But otherwise, I think you're probably a little bit safer and you won't get your pieces knocked off the shelf by the wind.
Well, thank you, Karen, for answering those practical questions. And it is, of course, for the whole art and craft community, the pandemic has been incredibly challenging. And so thank you for sharing your personal experiences with that. And it is for even those of us who want to get out and see art become more challenging of more independent artists. So thank you for sharing that. I have another question.
One thing I just wanted to add that When I was feeling low during the beginning of the pandemic, I dug out all of my workshop pieces that I had never finished. I don't know if you've ever had any of those lying around.
Oh, no.
And no, not at all. No. And I finished them. So I'm feeling really proud of myself.
Yeah, that's great. So another question from the chat and a comment. Very inspiring, your talk. The tall pieces look like it would be challenging to make them balanced, but I'm guessing they stay upright because the basketry is lighter than the ceramic. Can you say something about that?
It's a very good point. They could be tippy and you have to be careful with them. I think that what doesn't hurt is putting 3 little dots of museum putty underneath the pot and securing it to whatever piece you have, because we've had a case where a woman backed into her display case while she was vacuuming, and the whole thing came down, glass and pots and everything. There's no way around that. So you need to make sure that whatever you have it on has enough breathing room around it, especially the pieces with the inflorescence at the top, because they grab onto things as you walk by. They will reach out and grab you, and so you need to protect around them. But also, I figure a little museum putty at the bottom doesn't hurt. And also, you have to kind of think that these pieces, like this one here, there is weight coming down on the piece that makes it sturdier. The pot, of course, is heavier, but the vertical pressure, I think, probably helps. And by the way, we discourage people who have kitties who love to jump up on stuff. Honestly, we discourage them from buying a piece unless they can really secure it somewhere safe, because these are really expensive cat toys. So, they're probably really yummy to chew on and knock over and whatever. So
I have a question for you, Karen, and that is what was so fascinating about hearing your retrospective and your life journey from the moment that you first started weaving a basket through to today is it seemed to me like there were moments where there were turning points in your work, in your perspective. It sounds like maybe some workshops with our Linda Luganbill, that might have been a moment. And then the moment when by accident, Marc created an odd number of holes in the pottery. But can you say something about that? Can you talk a little bit about what was happening for you as an artist when these moments came? Were they immediately recognized, or was it scrambling and problem solving and then how was that for you, those moments of transition?
Well, thank you for asking. I'd tried a few different crafts in my spare time while I was working full time, and nothing really stuck like basket making. And I had a couple of American friends. We would sit together. One did enamel, the other did crochet, and I did baskets. And we said, God, wouldn't it be great if we got to do this full time? Just, I don't know, gee, should we look for an empty shop space here in town and try to open a shop? And I got real on them, and I said, if we open a shop, we won't have time to do this. So no, we're not doing that. And it was a hobby for me at the beginning, and I was learning the techniques and giving stuff away. And at some point, you can only have so many baskets in your house, right? So you start giving them away, or you start selling them. And I think a turning point for me, probably the first hit of reality, was coming back to the States, doing these shows, realizing that I couldn't charge very much for all the time I was putting into them. And that anybody could walk down to Hobby Lobby or Michael's and get a really nice basket from Southeast Asia or China for a fraction of the price. I can't make a living that way. So when I opened my business in 1997, I was in, I think I had just moved to Louisville. The whole idea when you go to the Small Business Association is that you write a business plan. And I knew right then that if I wrote a business plan, I would never continue with this work because I would never be able to make the numbers work. And I would always be underpaying myself. But I really, really wanted to do it. So I continued. I think as far as all the workshops were concerned, I took a lot of workshops that probably didn't have any direct relation to what I'm doing. But I tried them anyway because I thought maybe I can glean something from that. I can take that, change it, or adapt it to what I want to do. And I think I've been kind of successful in doing that. And the idea at the very end, you saw that those pieces at the end of the presentation are truly ours. I haven't seen anything like it at all the shows we've done. I haven't seen that combination in that form. So going from pots that are kind of sitting on top, or baskets sitting on top of pots, to really integrated, that's what's taken a really long time. So the aha moment, one big aha moment was when Marc messed things up for me and started putting slots in his beautiful pottery. And I had to find a way to adapt, but it made it so much more sculptural, so much easier to, well, no, it wasn't easy. I had to try really hard to bring the beauty of the pot up into the weaving and to show off the pot as much as I could. I didn't really answer your question, I don't think, but I tried.
Tomorrow,
I lost
perhaps
you.
more.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
I'm putting us onto the Brady Bunch squares. So if anyone has a question, you can unmute and ask the question directly to Karen. Any questions from our audience? Oh, I see some clapping, some thanks and appreciation for your presentation, Karen, going across the screen. And I see Gina has a question. If you have a question, just unmute and speak.
Was Gina gonna go?
Oh my.
Okay, there you are, Gina.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Finally, I was trying to
Hi,
unmute all that time. I don't have
Hi,
a
Gina.
question. Hi, nice to talk to you and enjoyed your wonderful presentation. I don't have a
Thank you.
question, but I have a little show and tell here, very quick. This is the first basket that I made. It's a garden basket. And you can see it's been well used and old. I made it 30 years ago this year, 1992, in Maggie's class. She taught a class with this right after Shuttle's opened, I believe. And I'm still using it. I've got a little work here to do on it where it started falling apart. But other than that, it's really served me well. And it launched me into making all sorts of baskets out of all sorts of things. So I just wanted to show that really quick and
Great, thank you. Thank
tell
you.
you how much I appreciated your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Other questions? Or is it time to let Karen go? So Karen, we so appreciate you coming. It was a marvelous journey through your basket making career. So appreciate that. And thank you for answering all
you.
the questions that we had.
I hope you can come tomorrow, or at least see the recording of the details, because I didn't get very much into details today. But anyway, I'm really glad that you stuck it out with my presentation. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me.
It was not difficult at all. So, and this is the point of the meeting. We thank you so much, and we look forward to tomorrow night. I will be there and very eager to hear and see more.
Thank you.
This is the point in the meeting when we go into show and tell, and that's something, if you want to stay, Karen, you are more than welcome to. But if you would like to get on with your day and get rested up for tomorrow, this is the time when you can leave the meeting. It's up to you. But we're going to move into show and tell and some sharing. And again, thank you, and tune in, everybody, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. for the Evening Guild meeting. And Karen will be presenting on new material. We thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks very much.
Karen, real quick, I wanted to share, you mentioned Harv Montelier's name, and I got to move into his studio space that was on Valmont off of 30th and Boulder for many years. So, and I went and visited his place up there near Rollinsville once, I think right when he got all moved in. I probably saw
how fun.
work there even, but
How fun.
and
Great.
thank you so
Okay.
much for
Thanks for that comment. I'll let them know. Thanks.
thank you.